Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Israel's Prime Minister confirms the death of Hamas Gaza chief Mohammad Sinwar in an Israeli airstrike. Zelensky meets Friedrich Merz in Berlin as Germany promises to finance Ukraine's long-range missiles. Meanwhile, Russia offers Ukraine a date and a place for negotiations. And in an Al Arabiya English exclusive, former Liverpool legend Michael Owen reflects on the parade crash as a 53-year-old suspect remains in custody. To our top story, an Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has confirmed Hamas's Gaza chief, Mohammad Sinwar, has been eliminated. Speaking to Parliament earlier, Netanyahu included Mohammad Sinwar, one of Israel's most wanted, and the younger brother of former leader Yahya Sinwar, in a list of Hamas leaders killed in Israeli strikes. Now take a listen.
In 600 days of war of revival, we have changed the face of the Middle East. We repelled the terrorists from our territory, entered the Gaza Strip with force, eliminated tens of thousands of terrorists, and took out Daif, Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar, and Mohammad Sinwar.
Now it's believed French President Emmanuel Macron is moving towards recognising a Palestinian state, but some believe such a move could be an ineffective way to encourage Israel towards a peace deal. Let's speak to journalist and author of Fixing France, Nabila Ramdani. Nabila, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. First of all, why has there been a shift in Emmanuel Macron's stance right now?
Well, I think that the shift in Macron's stance on Palestine is undoubtedly due to the increasingly horrific situation in Gaza. The president of France hasn't called the mass slaughter of men, women and children a genocide yet, but he knows that he should, and it's only an instinctive loyalty to Israel that is preventing him from doing so. And this genocide is being live streamed, and there is absolutely no excuse for anybody in the world to ignore it. And as a self-styled liberal and indeed a decent politician, Macron knows that he has to be seen to be doing something.
And do you think... oh, sorry, you just cut out there. Please do carry on.
Yes, I think Macron is a notorious middle roader who tries to keep everybody happy, so that that's why he's tempering his calls for a Palestinian state with an equal emphasis on the so-called security of Israel. But we all know that the security for Israel is currently being used as a euphemism for the destruction of Gaza and its population, and indeed large parts of the occupied West Bank and Palestinians who live there. So he has to be very careful. France and Saudi Arabia are co-hosting a United Nations conference next month in June to lay out a roadmap for a Palestinian state. And I think this is another principal reason why Macron needs to start backing up positive words with action. And if Macron goes ahead in recognizing a Palestinian state, then this would be a huge move. France would effectively be the first Western heavyweight to recognize a Palestinian state.
And do you think that Macron will actually go ahead with this move? You've said he's a middle roader, but are these just empty words from the French president at the moment?
Well, as we know from the entire history of the Israel-Palestine conflicts, words frequently turn out to be weasel ones. And again, we need to recognize what a duplicitous politician President Macron can be. He says one thing to impress one set of people and then says something completely different to another set of people. But in recent weeks, his foreign minister has suggested there could be sanctions against Israel. And so perhaps something is changing. And it was only last week that Jean-Noël Barrot came out with some of the most emotive words about Palestine that I think I've heard from a French government minister. And he said, and this is a quote from him, we cannot leave the children of Gaza a legacy of violence and hatred. So all this must stop. And that's why we're determined to recognize a Palestinian state. And I think those words aptly sum up the change in the French position. The French find the images coming out of Gaza absolutely abhorrent, and they know that radical measures are needed to stop Israel's war crimes and indeed crimes against humanity. And dare I say, Barrot very pointedly spoke about the need for concrete action and not just words. For example, he urged the European Union to review its entire relationship with Israel, especially in regards to Israel violating human rights. He said that such crimes committed by Israel could lead to the suspension of the accord that currently links the EU with Israel. And he even added that the situation in Gaza, to quote his words, is indefensible because blind violence leads to more violence, and the blocking of humanitarian aid by Israeli government have turned Gaza into a death trap, if not a cemetery. And I think Mr. Macron clearly feels hindered in fully expressing himself about Israel, so he allows his ministers to do it for him.
And Nabila, I just wanted to ask you, what are Israeli officials doing to prevent France recognizing a Palestinian state? And if this decision is made, it would certainly infuriate Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes, there is, of course, fierce opposition by the Israelis to countries such as France recognizing Palestine. They've spent months lobbying what some described as a potential nuclear bomb. And the idea that France, one of Israel's closest allies and a G7 member, could recognize a Palestinian state will certainly infuriate Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has already accused France, Britain, and indeed Canada of anti-Semitism for changing their stance.
And could, you alluded to it earlier, but could a shift in France's position, as you say, a major European power, lead to a wider sea change within the European Union and also the US?
I think a change in French policy could certainly influence the policy of major powers in Europe, in particular, including the USA. But countries like Britain in Europe, for example, have certainly changed their tune in relation to Israel. Earlier this month, both France and Britain joined Canada in condemning the Gaza slaughter, which is pretty unusual. And those countries also suggested there could be sanctions against Israel. France's most bold move, if it goes ahead, could also add momentum to a movement normally associated with smaller European countries that are generally far more critical of Israel. And those countries that have recognized the state of Palestine in recent years have included Ireland, Norway, and Spain. I've spoken to French diplomats who said that this is a real emergency and the world needs to move from words to deeds. Concrete measures are necessary. And these diplomats caution that while Mr. Macron now broadly favors the recognition of a Palestinian state, he has yet to make a final decision, and this will depend on how the situation in Gaza continues to play out. And this is why the June conference is so important.
Nabila Ramdani, journalist and author of Fixing France, thank you for joining us and thank you for your insights. Staying with Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly said the time is right for an attack on Iran as the US tries to negotiate a nuclear deal. We're now joined by Al Arabiya's geopolitical security analyst, Riad Kahwaji. Riad, always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Israel has actually come out and rejected a New York Times report that Netanyahu has been threatening to disrupt talks on a nuclear deal between the US and Iran by striking Iran's main nuclear facilities. Riyadh, are there signs that an attack is likely? And why is Israel denying this report?
Well, it's not the only report by the New York Times. There are other mainstream U.S. publications that spoke about reports attributed to the U.S. intelligence community talking about Israeli preparations for a strike on Iran nuclear facilities. And this is not a new thing. Definitely, there is a great deal of concern by Washington for what Netanyahu could do. Netanyahu has not been discreet about his reservations on the talks going on between the U.S. and Iran, and Netanyahu already expressed concern that there could be some big concessions given to Iran, allowing it to retain its nuclear program, especially the enrichment component of it. Even though now we've been hearing from the U.S. that their team is insisting on no enrichment for Iran, Iran is opposing. However, we still have the negotiations going, which seems to be making Netanyahu and his right-wing government quite concerned that there could be another deal that would allow Iran to retain its nuclear program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just wondering, why is it in Israel's interest to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, as you've just been explaining, especially at the time when the US is trying to desperately reach this deal with Iran? Is this just, does Israel have the power to do it? It's obviously fighting a war against Hamas.
Well, the difference here is that now the US and also other Western players are saying Iran could have a nuclear program, but without the enrichment component. So they will disrupt the full fuel cycle. Israel, on the other hand, is saying no. They want to have the dismantling of the whole nuclear facilities, no nuclear capability whatsoever. And, just Iran could get what it needs for its nuclear power facilities from abroad. And this is here where we have a difference. So for Israel to feel safe that this government in Iran would not have any nuclear capability whatsoever, they're talking about, going to the extreme measures of resorting to military. Now, there are observers who are saying that these leaks in the newspapers could be a means to exercise some sort of pressure on Iran, telling Iran that, let's move to an agreement because Israel is about to do something, to avoid sliding into a military confrontation. So as a means of pressure. However, it's known that there is a big consensus within Israel in favor of military action to remove this potential future threat on Israel.
So if Israel do decide to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, is this a real flashpoint in the Middle East? Could this escalate to something more?
Of course, this has been the concern by many analysts and observers and even officials that a strike on Iran could first generate a reaction, a military reaction, retaliation from Iran. Iran has threatened to target U.S. bases in the region, has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. This will cause a great deal of disruption to the oil market. We'll see the oil prices skyrocketing. This will have big implications on the global economy. So the ramifications and the consequence of an Israeli strike, especially if it is unilateral, not coordinated with anybody, could catch the whole region off guard, could catch the U.S. off guard. the question here, the concern, is that, okay, Israel has the capability to strike some nuclear facilities, especially the enrichment facilities. But would Israel take such a chance and risk not having the U.S. support in defending against the expected Iranian retaliation? You know, we saw Iran use an extensive number of ballistic missiles, drones, cruise missiles, and the U.S. played a big role. Its fighters, its air defenses, and shooting down these incoming drones or missiles from the Iranian side. What if the U.S. does not come to the rescue this time because Netanyahu went against the wishes of Trump? This is a big gamble Israel would take by carrying out this strike action unilaterally without coordination or some sort of consensus. I mean, for now, the U.S. wants the talks to go so long as Iran is willing to engage to reach results. If Iran refuses to make any concessions, then the U.S. has left the military option on the table.
And I just want to talk to you just quickly, if we can, about OPEC+, because the members of OPEC+ are obviously meeting in Vienna to discuss an oil production strategy. President Trump has offered Iran two scenarios, a deal or no deal when it comes to these talks. If it's a no deal, we could see sanctions placed on Iranian oil. Now, what impacts will this have?
Well, it depends what sort of sanctions. I mean, they've been talking about secondary sanctions. That means the U.S. would be imposing sanctions on the countries and the companies that buy Iranian oil and petrochemicals. Again, we don't know how wide this would be, because if it is sanctions on Chinese companies, I don't think it's going to have that much effect. But if there are other players who would be really affected by being, a victim of this secondary sanctions, possible. It is not really clear how much of ramifications. However, if, like, for example, the U.S. goes in its sanctions to start boarding oil tankers, Iranian oil tankers, and confiscating them, then at this point we could see a serious impact on the Iranian oil exports and a possible escalation that would impact the oil prices.
And I just wanted to say, Riad Kahwaji, Arabiya's geopolitical security analyst, every time you come on, I feel like I learn so much. Thank you so much for your insights. I really appreciate you having you on the show once again. Thank you. Now, President Zelensky has been in Berlin today as Germany promised to finance Ukrainian-made long-range missiles. In a joint press conference, the German Chancellor said the weapons meant Ukraine could defend itself beyond its borders, and Germany wanted permanent peace for Ukraine. Here's what he had to say.
Our defence ministers are going to sign a memorandum of understanding on the procurement of long-range weapon systems produced by Ukraine, so-called long-range fires. There will be no range limits on these. Ukraine will be able to fully defend itself, including against military targets outside its own territory.
We can now speak to Dr. Oleksandr Merezhko, who heads up the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament. It's so great to have you on the show, Dr. Oleksandr. First of all, Russia has offered Ukraine a date and venue for the second round of direct talks. Is Ukraine going to agree to these talks?
Well, actually, we have started such negotiations with Russia recently in Istanbul. But at the same time, when we're talking about serious negotiations, we would like to see Mr. Putin participating directly. But so far, he's trying to avoid direct face-to-face talk with Ukrainian president. And on the basis of our previous experience, we can say that Russia has never been negotiating according to good faith, in earnest. Putin needs negotiations for only one reason: to avoid sanctions which can be imposed upon Russia by the President Trump.
So are you going to go to these talks? Will Ukraine be at those? I just want to clarify if it's a yes or no, because Russia says Vladimir Putin's negotiator, Vladimir Merezhko, is going to be at those talks. And obviously, once again, they're hoping that they could be possibly held in Istanbul.
We are ready to negotiate, but again, we would like to see a format of negotiations which would include the United States and our European partners.
And let's just move on slightly. The Kremlin says Merck's move with Ukraine on long-range missiles is irresponsible. We know that Zelensky was in Berlin today. What is your response to Russia?
Russia wants to continue to kill Ukrainians, to bomb our cities, including the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, with impunity. But of course, it's not realistic. Under the UN Charter, Article 51, we have inalienable right to defend ourselves, the right to self-defense. This is what we're doing. We're the victim of the aggression. We're not the aggressor. And we have right to use all the means available, including long-range missiles, to defend ourselves.
The government of the German Chancellor says Taurus missiles are still a possibility for Ukraine. And I just wanted to ask, how vital are these missiles for Ukraine? And are US weapon stockpiles beginning to diminish in Ukraine?
Yes, first of all, of course, we would like to have more missiles because, you know, first of all, this is about our air defense systems. And for example, we need American air defense systems in missiles like Patriot because they help to save lives of civilians in many cities of Ukraine. And of course, we don't have enough such missiles. That's why we would like to count on more support from the new president of the United States, and we can rely on support of our European partners. That's why we need European long-range missiles like Taurus. And we're optimistic that we will get these missiles and it will enhance our defensive capabilities.
But would you be concerned that Russia would see that as an escalation in the war? And as you've said to me, that you want to negotiate with Russia, you want a peace plan in place going forward. Would this not be something that will make things even worse?
It will not make things worse because they're already really bad. And Russia is using this argument about escalation to blackmail. The truth is that Russia can very easily stop the war by withdrawing its troops from the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. Or at least Russia could agree to ceasefire for 30 days. And it was initial proposal by President Trump, and it was proposal by the European leaders, including President of France, the UK Prime Minister, and the German Chancellor. So Russia can show that it is truly interested in negotiations by agreeing unconditionally to ceasefire, because Ukraine has already agreed to this unconditionally.
And I just want to ask you quickly before I let you go. Zelensky has called on the US to ramp up sanctions on Russia. Do you think this is going to happen anytime soon? He's called for this before.
We hope that it will happen because the goal, our common goal, is to stop Russian war machine from running. We can do it only in one way, by depriving Russia profits which it receives from selling Russian gas and oil and using it as a lifeline, as a fuel to continue aggression against Ukraine. We hope that American Congress will impose tariffs, 500% tariffs on Russia and on those countries, those companies which help Russia to avoid sanctions.
Dr. Oleksandr Merezhko, who heads up the Foreign Affairs Committee of Ukrainian Parliament, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you on the show. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The Trump administration has stopped international student visa applications as it engages in a standoff with Harvard University. No new visa interviews will be scheduled for foreign students who wish to study in the US as it prepares to extend vetting the social media of applicants. A drop in international students may affect university budgets that rely on international fees to balance out cuts in federal research funding. Now in Spain, hundreds of Madrid taxi drivers have protested in the streets against what they claim is unfair competition from ride-hailing services. European authorities have rejected a limitation in Spain, which caps the number of private hire vehicles like Uber and Cabify. Taxi drivers have accused Madrid authorities of granting Cabify 8,500 new licenses. Texas has signed a bill requiring Apple and Google to verify the age of users of their app stores. Under the new law, minors will need parental approval before they can download apps or make in-app purchases. Apple and Google have opposed the bill, saying it imposes requirements to share age data. Utah was the first state to pass a similar law, which was earlier this year. And a Delta flight travelling from Minneapolis to Wisconsin was delayed after two pigeons ended up on board the aircraft. A video shows one of the birds flying through the cabin as a passenger attempts to catch it with a jacket. The flight arrived in Wisconsin 1 hour later than scheduled, and I don't think any birds were harmed in that video. What should have been a night of celebration in Liverpool turned into something far darker as hundreds of thousands of jubilant fans took to the streets to mark another Premier League victory for Liverpool. Joy turned to horror when a 53-year-old man drove his car into a crowd. A shocking moment that's shaken not just the football world, but communities far beyond. To help us reflect on what this means for the city and the wider football family, we're joined by someone who understands both better than most. A Liverpool legend who lit up Anfield as a teenager and went on to win the Ballon d'Or, the first English player to do so for 20 years. Michael Owen, many thanks for joining us. An absolute pleasure to have you on the show this evening. Michael, when you first heard what happened on Monday night, that a car had driven into crowds celebrating Liverpool's win, what went through your mind at that moment?
Yeah, great to join you. Thank you so much. When I heard the news, it was obviously your mind starts racing. You can't help but think, what was the motive? What's happened? Is everyone safe? Has there been any fatalities? You can't help but think back to other, awful situations in Liverpool's past with different disasters. Obviously, the Heysel Stadium and then Hillsborough, and you can't help, your mind can't help wondering why. And we still sort of await the news really in terms of what exactly happened. And it's such a shame because, you want these huge events to go off with great celebration, with great happiness, with great joy. And of course, this headline has dominated it all. So very sad indeed.
And Michael, you know those streets. You've walked them after wins, after really tough games when you're playing for Liverpool. Does it feel personal when something like this actually happens in the place that you've called home for so long?
I suppose it would, if there was something sinister about let's call it an attack. As I say, we're still almost guessing as to what it was. The authorities have ruled out any, any real sort of threat, any real problem. So whether the gentleman involved was, intoxicated, whether he took the wrong turn, whether he panicked, whether he did this on purpose, we're still waiting to find out. But I think they've ruled out some of the some other scenarios, let's say. So that, I don't know. Let's wait and see what comes out of it. But it does just make you rather upset about a great occasion like this that was almost, that has been spoilt, really. This has taken all the headlines. Nobody's really sharing pictures of the parade itself. I had family members that were at the parade, and of course, the first thing you do when you hear about it is you phone them. You hear, you want to know that everybody's okay, everybody's safe, and that's the sad thing. It's only sort of a few miles down the road, so yeah, very worrying. But it could have been worse, and hopefully, we find out more, and hopefully there was no real motives, let's say, for what happened on that evening.
Yes, indeed. And Michael, we are hearing from police that the 53-year-old man who was arrested remains in custody, and he was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, dangerous driving and driving while unfit through drugs. But obviously, of course, we'll find out more details about that, as you do say. But what has been the reaction from your former teammates? Have you been speaking to any of them? What's been the feeling between the members of Liverpool Football Club?
Well, just one of sadness, really, because it should have been a day of celebration. It has been an amazing few weeks. Liverpool have known that they've won the league for some time now, and it's been just the most incredible party from when it was official against Tottenham Hotspur at home to the lifting of the trophy at Anfield on Sunday. It's been a great moment. Remember, Liverpool, last time they won the Premier League, it was during COVID, so they couldn't celebrate with their fans. So the trophy, the Premier League trophy, has never been lifted in front of the fans before, and this was sort of the first time in many, many years that celebration could take place. That the league winners, I think it was 30 odd years ago or something, that Liverpool have managed to lift the league trophy in front of their fans. So it was a joyous occasion. And I think as soon as it happened, like normal, like our communication nowadays entails, that, messages go round. Have you seen the news? Have you heard the news? Keep me informed. We're all on sort of WhatsApp groups and chats and things like that. So, one of shock to start with, and then of course you get your head around it and you try to understand, and then you want to know more details, whether any motives, that anybody, any fatalities or anybody badly injured, and you think about your own family being there, etc., etc. So I think just a state of panic, really, for the first hour or so, until it all calms down a little bit. And that was the chain of events. And as I say, you can't help but think, Liverpool as a city have been, so robust over time. They come together, as I've mentioned, two horrific footballing disasters. There was a huge attack as well on the outskirts of Liverpool in the north, in the Southport area, not so long ago, on a lot of young children, and that was just one of the most horrific times as well for the area. So it was almost, please, not another one. And thankfully, fingers crossed, it sounds like it's not as bad as, let's say, we first feared. So hopefully we can, put this behind us in the future and remember what a great season it was for Liverpool Football Club and all its people.
And Michael, do you think the club or players have a role in helping the community heal after events like this? And how important is it that kind of leadership is in place?
Well, they do. Absolutely, they do. Football clubs are the heartbeat of virtually every community, every town, every city in the UK. And, they've always been like that. And we thrust our players in front of the cameras a lot of the time. They weren't born to speak in front of the cameras about situations like that, but they hold such, people hold them in such, they revere them and hold them in such high regard. that often we throw our clubs, of the people, the players, the manager, etc., in front of situations like this, and I think that they lead the way, in doing an incredible job. So yes, statements have already come out from the club, from people close to it, the players, the ex-players, etc., all unify in moments like this. And as I say, I'm just hoping initial thoughts, initial news suggest it's not as bad as first feared. And hopefully we can put it behind us quite quickly. But of course, with what's happened in the past, you can understand that the people of Liverpool, originally are in a lot of shock and a lot of horror and worry that everybody's okay. But it seems like that's the case. So hopefully, as I say, we can we don't have to put it down as another huge moment in the history of the club.
And if you could speak directly to the fans who were there that night, and the ones who went out to celebrate and who've been left shaken, what would you want to say to them?
Well, I mean, it was a night of, well, it should have been a night of joy and happiness and celebration that their club has had an incredible season. The Premier League is such a hard, league to play in and a hard one to win. And it all should have been, joy and happiness. Now, that's obviously tainted. These news, the scenes, are all dominating the news as we stand. And of course, football plays second fiddle to the health and well-being of the community. So, I'm sure that once it all settles down, I'm sure when we hear the truth and what happened and whether it was intentional, whether it was a mistake or whatever happened, then it will lay people's, minds at rest maybe. We all know the world we live in. When you gather in crowds nowadays, it can be dangerous. That's the sad state of the world, really. But in general, it was a really happy day, a happy night, tarnished right at the end of it. And hopefully it doesn't tarnish it for the long run. Hopefully we're talking about, nobody getting seriously hurt. Hopefully we're talking about the football side of things again and how the football club brings everybody together. So yes, we're all worried. We were all worried, especially when we first heard the news. But I think a sense of calm now is descending on the city. People will be getting more and more positive again about what's happened over the past season on the football pitch. And of course, we've always got to be wary of things that are almost out of our control in situations like this. But a real shock to the system, let's say. But as I say, don't necessarily want to, go overboard, because, as I say, hopefully the news is a positive bit of news and that nobody's seriously hurt and that maybe the attack was not meant to happen, let's say.
And just to finally finish, Michael, is this a wake-up call, not just for fans, but for city officials and clubs to rethink how they prepare for big moments like this to make sure this never happens again?
Well, maybe so. I think, it is quite thorough. We've had, lots of celebrations over the last week or so. Crystal Palace won the FA Cup. They had huge celebrations down in London. They went off really, really positive, really safely. Liverpool, of course, winning the league. But you will get, at this time of the year, you'll get celebrations all over the world for, this is the time of the year, really. And of course, everybody's got to be vigilant, especially in this day and age. It's not the first time there's been a parade in the city. I was part of a parade when we won all those trophies back in 2001, and it was just the most incredible day. So, yes, be vigilant. I'm sure the authorities, the police force and everybody else like that takes these events really seriously. And inevitably something goes wrong and everybody's got to just have a look at all the measures that we put in place. But, I don't think an event like that is going to be stopped in the future because it's such a joyous moment. And most of the time, 99 times out of 100, it goes off really, really peacefully and everybody has a great time. So.
Michael Owen, thank you so much for joining us and for your thoughts and kind words.
Now, I'd like to bring you a bit of breaking news. In the last 10 minutes, President Donald Trump has been speaking from the White House. He said an Iran deal could happen over the next few weeks, and they want to make a deal. He also said he has warned Benjamin Netanyahu against action in Iran and added he's told Netanyahu they are close to a solution. So that was some breaking news lines from Donald Trump, who's been speaking at the White House on those US-Iran nuclear talks happening. Now, SpaceX's Starship rocket has failed for the third time after a test flight last night. It started spinning out of control about 30 minutes after launch, after fuel leaks breaking up on re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere. There were hopes that the vessel would be used to take people and cargo to and from Mars, but this setback casts doubt on those plans. Sara Firth has the story.
Cheers from the SpaceX team and onlookers as they launched the Starship rocket on its 9th test flight. The vessel had been mounted on what's called a super heavy booster that for the first time was being reused. And whilst things seemed to begin smoothly, plans to release a series of mock satellites after liftoff ran into some difficulty.
Now we are expecting the payload door to open any moment now.
We heard the door open was in progress. It was unable to actuate all the way open, so they are going to close it back up.
And it was downhill from there, quite literally, with the rocket spinning out of control because of fuel leaks and breaking up upon re-entry before a hard landing in the Gulf of Mexico. Despite dashed hopes of a successful mission, the SpaceX commentator describing the flight as a big moment.
So not able to do a lot of our on-orbit objectives today, but just the fact that we, got it into space was just a really big moment for a lot of the team.
In a statement, the company said, "With a test like this, success comes from what we learn, and today's test will help us improve Starship's reliability." But with the third failure for the spaceship test flight in a row, the vision SpaceX founder Elon Musk has for flying people to Mars one day, and that NASA has of being able to use the rocket to put astronauts back on the moon, is not looking as close as the billionaire businessman would perhaps like it to be. Musk promising an increased pace for future test flights that will be taking place in the near future. Sara Firth, Al Arabiya News.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. PDD Holdings, the Chinese owner of online shopping platform Temu, has reported a near 50% drop in profit. It comes as President Trump's trade policies add to the company's struggles in China. US-listed shares of the e-commerce giant fell by more than 13% on Tuesday after the firm said its profits for the first 3 months of the year have fallen. Now, Thames Water has been hit by a record fine of £122.7 million by the regulator Ofwat. It follows 2 investigations related to the UK's biggest water provider's wastewater operations and also dividend payouts. The fine will be paid by Thames Water and its shareholders rather than the customers. Now let's go to sport, and Emma Raducanu is out of the French Open after losing her second round match to the defending champion Iga Swiatek. The Briton was facing a tough task against the queen of Roland Garros as she scored. And Paddy Pimblett says he would love to fight Ilia Topuria in Abu Dhabi, but his opponent is most likely going to be Justin Gaethje. Liverpool's Pimblett earned a statement win over Michael Chandler last month before calling for his next bout to be against an opponent ranked in the top 5. The UFC usually hosts a numbered event in Abu Dhabi in October, but a potential date for this year's show has not been set yet. A reminder of our top stories. Israel's Prime Minister confirms the death of Hamas Gaza chief Mohammad Sinwar in an Israeli airstrike. Zelensky meets Friedrich Merz in Berlin as Germany promises to finance Ukraine's long-range missiles. Meanwhile, Russia offers Ukraine a date and place for negotiations. And in an Al Arabiya English exclusive, former Liverpool legend Michael Owen reflects on the parade crash as a 53-year-old suspect remains in custody. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora is coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye.